ethical dilemmas captured in this story? Well, there's obviously quite a number that we can see in this story, but one of the biggest ones in this movie is when high-ranking corporate executives at Brown and Williamson actually knowingly approve the addition of additives to their cigarettes that were known to be carcinogenic and addictive so as to boost their cigarette sales. And when Wiegand actually brought this up to his supervisors, he was fired on the basis of poor communication skills. And after that, Brown and Williamson actually forced him to sign extended confidentiality agreement, even after he had already been given out his company payout settlement, and even actually threatened his family's medical insurance because they knew that his daughter needed it, as well as his family's safety indirectly by putting like bullet shells in his mailbox and, having death threats to his computer. And another big one that's in the movie as well is when CBS plays the alternate version of Wiegand's interview on 60 Seconds because of the fear of being sued. I mean, I don't know how great an extent that's actually even news if you're playing a censored version instead of letting the true version out to the public because you're afraid of losing money. Again, not a very ethical issue. One of my favorite quotes in the whole movie is when Bergman is actually enraged and actually says this to his supervisor: "Are you a businessman or a newsman?" The next question is, how does the context affect the movie? I actually found out through research that Kentucky is the state with the most number of tobacco growers, which might be the reason why he was issued a restraining order by the state court in Kentucky to prevent him from testifying in the Mississippi court when they found out that he was planning to aid the Mississippi lawyers in getting Big Tobacco to reimburse the state for Medicaid funds used to treat people with smoking-related illness. I mean, obviously it would have been a big chunk of their state income and state tax, and that might have been the reason that contributed to how the context affected the story. The next question is, how did this story go on to affect the tobacco industry? Shortly after the 60 Minutes segment with Wiegand was broadcasted, the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement of 1998 actually came out, where the states settled their Medicaid lawsuits against the tobacco industry for the recovery of their tobacco-related healthcare costs, and also exempted the companies from private tort liability regarding harm caused by tobacco use. And so that basically ended the tobacco wars between the four big tobacco companies in the U.S. and the states. And in exchange for that, the companies actually agreed to seize tobacco marketing practices and to pay annual payments to the states to compensate them for some of the medical costs of the caring for persons with smoking-related illnesses. And this agreement actually also restricted their advertising and sponsorship and lobbying in those activities that were targeting youth. So that was a big thing that changed the way the tobacco industry in America. And the next question is, how does this affect your perception of journalism, journalists, producers, and media corporations? Well, this movie has definitely opened up my eyes to, investigative journalism, and as well as, seeing how much news is censored in our everyday lives. We think that we live in a democratic society of America where, there's free speech, First Amendment rights, but really how much of news is actually censored by corporations such as CBS. It was, like I mentioned earlier in that scene with Bergman and his supervisor, it was pretty obvious that, this is probably not uncommon that news corporations do censor stuff like that. And I feel that as journalists, we have a moral obligation and a duty to the public and the people, the American people, to, deliver the truth and not the censored truth. So, I mean, obviously this has changed my perception of journalism, but unfortunately this is probably the reality of it. It might bring up a couple ethical issues, but, I'll leave you with that question to think about.